When we first started Banyan Tree, there were only two things in mind. One was, will we survive? As a big question mark, which, as I said, has only been answered after 30 years. I'm sure we will survive now. And the other one was, we have to be international in order to survive.
As WIT marks its 20th year in 2025, we turn the spotlight on our community to tell their stories and share their views on the evolution of online travel and technology. Conversations on Turning 20 is the collective story of WIT. As a Chinese saying goes, 以古为鉴,可以知形体. By using history as a mirror, one can understand the rise and fall of things.
In fact, on our 30th anniversary, when we got everybody together, I gave a talk where many of the people who have been with us a long time remember my analogy. And I said, for the first time, I think we have crossed the danger point. The analogy I've used for the last 30 years when people ask me where we are is, I said, for 30 years, we have been the antelope crossing the river in an African sort of environment, where basically your animals all cross the river to get to the other side in I guess, seasonal migration. And then there are a lot of crocodiles there. Some antelopes make it, some don't. And I've always said that we are like the antelope that cannot just stay at in the comfort and protection of the home bank. Neither have we crossed to the far bank where you now have new pastures. We are the antelope in the middle, very, very fraught with danger and with lots of crocodiles. For 30 years, I've said that about us, that we cannot rest assured that we can survive. The only, I think, real difference now is that after 30 years, 100 hotels, which we will have by middle of this year, and many other reasons, and a very, very strong financial base, I actually can say we've crossed to the other side. Now, using the same analogy, when you've crossed to the other side, there's really a big vista ahead of you. There are mountains, there are deserts, there are things that you're not familiar with if we came from the rainforest. But there are going to be different challenges. But we're no longer in the middle of the river, just worried whether we will survive. We have definitely crossed. We are prosperous, but the challenges are ahead of a different nature, a desert, a mountain, not a rainforest. So it's different challenges. And that's how I would characterize where we are today. We actually had quite a number of hotels in the desert. We had a beautiful Banyan Tree, Ras Al Khaimah, but unfortunately, for various reasons, we decided to give it up. And we also have had hotels in Bahrain and so on. And we still have hotels in Dubai and so on. But I think the point here is the necessity to always treat each new place with excitement and wonderment, and to see each new place as having some unique experience that a customer can enjoy. Now, to the extent that our Ula is very different, it's a desert and so on, we obviously have to be aware of the technical issues, right? Heat management, cold management, a lot of other issues we have to manage properly as professional hoteliers. But on the other hand, it's not that different. If you decide that you're going to be the kind of person that will wake up every day with open eyes and wherever you are, you see the beauty of the world as it is, then it's not fundamentally and philosophically different to operate in Aula as it would be in Banyan Tree Buahan, our property in Ubud, the one with no doors, no walls, where you could equally say the challenge of operating a property which has no doors, no walls in tropical Asia, with the fear of insects, with the fear of rain and so on, and yet that has succeeded so well. So if you bring the fundamental attitude that everything you look at with new eyes, and you try to see the world in wonderment and to try to bring the wonders of the world to the customer, then the challenge becomes quite manageable. They become technical challenges. They're not conceptual, psychological challenges because you're quite used to everything you see is new. So somebody in our group was joking that, in 50 years' time, we should open a Banyan Tree on the moon and under the sea. And frankly, if the technology ever got that way, I don't think we would be flustered by it. I mean, I think waking up on the moon one day would be fantastic, but we ain't going to handle the technical issues. We have, in fact, received some inquiries from people who want us to do a hotel underwater. That's much more, the Saudis were talking about things like that, but now with less money now, the Saudis are no longer talking about grand projects. But clearly, the idea of a hotel underwater is not beyond the realm of imagination at all, where basically you stay underwater and you basically can do all the diving underwater without having to worry about, surfacing and so on, because you'd be pressurized naturally. Those things are definitely stuff I'd love to do, but to me, they're not like the end all of all things. Doing something there, doing something on Antarctica, doing something beautiful in Africa, the world and the world beyond our world, the moon and the oceans and so on, are all very exciting. Every part of the world is an exciting place. And I think it's the ability and the passion to see things as with a newborn's eye, basically, that you don't become jaded and say, oh, I've been there, done that. This is so boring. It's the ability to see things as big, fresh, that I think enables us to continue the way we have been. Look, a lot of it is not the region that we're excited by per se. It's also the newness of the region together with the opportunities. So, for example, one region that I'm particularly involved in right now, as I've said, I've got a place there, we're building a house there, and I spend a lot of time there, would be a very old region, which is Japan. But Japan, you might have just read, has experienced a 30% year-on-year growth in tourism. It is the fastest growing tourism market in the whole world in terms of rate of growth. Yet it's been around for, thousands of years. And Japan is a good example because I've been looking at doing business development in Japan for the last 30 years. Never had a single project for 29 years or 27 years. And then since 3 years ago, we've got 6 projects already. And now we've got 7 to 8 banyan trees in the pipeline. And one is already open and others are opening. We've got other brands coming up. So Japan is certainly the flavor of the month. Then, there are other new areas in Europe that are opening up around the Adriatic area. I think Eastern Europe is going to be more interesting also. And for us, for example, we're looking at the Americas, not only Mexico, but even USA, which you could say is a very mature market, but for us is a new market. So, and another area that we've signed quite a number of deals would be the Turkic-speaking regions of Turkey, the Stans, and the whole Central Asia area. So those are all terribly exciting. We're opening up our first property, a safari camp in Tanzania, which I hope will be the beginning of Banyan Trees venturing into safari camps, which is a very natural part of what we would want to do. So, I mean, to us, there's so many interesting areas that it's not one area. The whole world is a big place, and there are very many interesting areas that we continue to want to grow in. I mean, that's why it's kind of funny. I mean, my colleagues think I should be retiring by now, and I probably should be. But it's hard when you actually do see the world with excitement. I mean, I was so excited by Aula because there's actually a lot of information about Aula, not only the ruins of Hegra, which you might have gone to. Hegra is related to Petra in Jordan and so that whole cultural, historical part of the world I did not know about. Then the geological part. Actually, Aula is a site of a number of calderas, volcanic calderas. So it used to be a volcanic region, which was under the sea. So when you look at things like that, you realize, the world is a very big place and you've only hardly penetrated it, and it's exciting. When we first started Banyan Tree, there were only 2 things in mind. One was, will we survive? as a big question mark, which, as I said, has only been answered after 30 years. I'm sure we will survive now. And the other one was we have to be international in order to survive. Not coming from a big country like Thailand with Dusit, Oberoi in India, Zhejiang in China, right? We we have no home market to look towards. And so if you want to survive, you have to be international. So those were the only two things we had in mind. We had to be international to survive, and we must survive. And it sounds very simple, but if you look at the history of boutique hotel chains that originated in Asia, from Six Senses with Sonu, a good friend, with Adrian, a good friend, with Alila, Aman, Six Senses, you just name them. They're all gone, man. There's none left. And that's quite sobering. It's not something for me to beat my chest on. They've all been acquired by others. And so our performance ambition that we've set out, our goal or mission statement that we've told all our colleagues is to be a trusted and respected, but multinational and multi-branded, but very importantly, independent hospitality player in the world. And it's very difficult to be independent. Oberoi is probably majority owned now by Reliance. Unfortunately, because Chalin is a very good friend of mine, there's massive family dispute. So, where does the story end? We're hardly clear. I'm the first generation. I think the second generation is going to do well, but there's no assurance of survival in this world. So to me, as somebody once said, 90% of success is simply surviving. Well, I mean, the time spent inspecting the interiors of an incarceration facility has made me realize that even a 15 square meter hotel room is quite nice. I think what it has given, definitely not the accommodations. The reason we went into Banyan Group was because it was a so-called luxury boutique hotels was a space nobody else wanted to play in. The big boys didn't want to go in there because the fee structure was not attractive enough for them. They wanted to do 300 key hotels. But I think the fact that I backpacked a lot, hitchhiked a lot when I was a teenager, and then I spent time in jail, I think that probably subconsciously is making me realize that the freedom of being able to move around everywhere to see the beauty of the world is a very cherished thing. And I definitely believe, as some people have said, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You need to feed yourself, then you need to find a place to stay, then you need to clothe yourself. There's a hierarchy of needs. In my view, one of the hierarchy of needs, once you'll be able to feed yourself, clothe yourself, and so on, is to travel around you, to see the world around you. And if you are from a tribe, the old days, is to venture beyond your tribe to see other tribes, to see what's on the other side of the hill. And that fundamental tribal need to see what's on the other side of the hill, to see what's outside the forest you are in, to go beyond the boundaries of the waters that seem to surround you if you live on an island. The need to explore the world to see what is there is a fundamental need. And I think that was increased during incarceration. It was basically it because I traveled a lot. And I think that need will always be there by people to see what there is in this world. And I think that's what is the more noble part of hospitality, not just to make money from travelers, but to actually enable people to enjoy the beauty of the physical world and the beauty of the cultural world that they inhabit. I think there's two issues here. One is you're talking about when I felt we were safe enough to say that we can survive. One is about survival. The other one is about scalability. I would say the irony about scalability is that you either have to be totally scalable or you don't need scalability. So, and I think it's important to make that difference. I think a lot of boutique hotels survive very well in the world. How many hotels do you know of in Europe which have been there, maybe only one or two hotels in Switzerland that have existed for the last 300 years, owned by a family, and they'll go on existing for the next 300 years, and they don't need to scale. So if you are in the hotel business, it is possible not to scale. But if you happen to be in a business that depends on scalability for sheer survival, and then you cannot scale, then you are dead. So if you are in pure tech, or if not in pure tech, but you are in, let's say, if you are in an app business, any kind of app needs scalability because the whole basis of an app is that there are millions and millions of people who are using your app because there's not much difference between your app and the other app. So if you are going to be an OTA and you don't have scale to be among the top 3 or 4 OTAs in the world, you die. But if you want to be a boutique hotel owner, not a manager, a boutique hotel, if you want to be a small hotel management company, you die. You have to scale up. But if you want to own 2 or 3 hotels, that's fine, like a restaurant or something. So I think we must make that differentiation. Now, so that's on the issue of scalability. I think when I say we've crossed the river and we can survive, it's not just about scale. We definitely do have more scalability now, but we don't have the scalability of a tech company. We have diversification. We've now built a pyramid of brands so that we're not only about a boutique super luxury hotel. We run the whole pyramid now from mid-scale, upscale, upper upscale, all the way to ultra lux. And therefore, we now have the financial strength. We have the diversification. We have got the balance sheet, which is important. We have sufficient depth of management resources. We have a whole list of things which, when I look at it now, I would say we definitely can grow from here. She's only 40. We have a CEO whom I worked with for 20 over years, who is only 60, and he'll definitely be there until he retires at maybe 65 or beyond. I've got a youngest son who was a lawyer who's entered the business. He's leaving to go and do an MBA, but he'll come back. I've got an elder son who's in our other family business, but who has a hand in Banyan Tree. How do I handle succession? I think one of the major things I have learned, and I was just discussing this with some friends just recently, was how, and this is an important insight, I think, and that is that if a successor generation fails, the main reason is actually the fault of the parents, not the fault of that succeeding generation itself. And I think that you find that borne out everywhere. You see that politically within the Lee family. You see that with a lot of other family businesses. And I think the main point is successor generations will always have their intrinsic tensions. And most of the time, these tensions are covered up during the parents' generation. And they have no chance to surface and be resolved in the parents or the patriarch is still alive, because of the sake that everybody is, half pretending that everything is hunky-dory and the father is still there, the parents are still there. So you've got these simmering tensions which are never brought forward. And then the parents die, the successor, the founding generation dies, and then the next one takes over. And for a few years, things are fine. But when a crisis hits, they don't know how to deal with it and they start breaking apart. So my simple answer to you is, I don't worry about the individual capabilities of my children. I think they are quite good and they've learned enough that whatever they don't know, they can find people who know much more than them. I think the one thing I've learned is that even while I'm still alive, I need to have them interact with each other substantially without my presence, so that they really started to learn how to deal with potential tensions that they may have at a time when I'm still alive, so that we can discuss some of these tensions. I can watch some of these tensions, and I can help them ease into a situation where when I'm no longer around, they're actually already quite adept at dealing with inevitable tensions, rather than believe romantically that because they were all siblings, all happy with each other during their parents, tensions should not be there. And therefore, when these tensions arise, they don't know how to deal with it because their parents are no longer there. So that is one of my most important insights, for which I'm trying to do my best now, that they really have time to discuss how they want to manage the business, how they see the future of the company, how they have different views, and so on and so forth. All this in anticipation that they will have to deal with these issues later on. And it's knowing how to deal with these issues that is, in fact, more difficult than dealing with the issue of or COVID, or dealing with the issue of and any kind of external crisis, which is actually not that difficult to deal with because you've learned it from others, your colleagues tell you about it. So dealing with an external crisis isn't that big a deal. Dealing with own family tensions is a much bigger deal, for which you've never learned anything in business school. What's happening now is the clear end game of Pax Americana and the beginning of the era of Fortress Americana. And the future is going to be what the world was like before Western colonialism, which only started about 200 years ago. But if you go beyond 200 years ago, it wasn't the Western world ruling the world. It wasn't China ruling the world. It was China having its own space in East Asia and its own vassal states around Southeast Asia. It was Europe. It was the Americas. And it was, maybe as Islamic world. You had different civilizations all competing and co-equal under the sun. Western values and civilization is no longer going to be the only model. But it does not mean, on the other hand, a zero-sum game that you're having an Asian century and that American or Western century is down. I think you're going to definitely see the rise of an Asian civilization, but it doesn't mean they're going to be dominant either. It's going to be co-equal civilizations. I've always said that one of the most underlooked impacts that I think particularly for Asia is going to be the impact of AI on simultaneous translation, which Google is already coming up with. Because if you look at Southeast Asia in particular, the linguistic differences in Southeast Asia is far more fragmented than that in Europe, clearly not in China. India also not that much, and certainly in South America, it's all Hispanic. In North America, it's all English. In Europe, although there's a multitude of languages, everybody is conversant in English, even young people. But in Southeast Asia, there's a whole, it's a whole Tower of Babel in terms of languages and culture. But that is going to change so rapidly in a way that I don't think people can expect. When you can speak in Tagalog and somebody in Thailand can understand you, and vice versa and so on, that is going to make travel within Southeast Asia become so amazing. And I think that will have a far deeper impact on hospitality within Southeast Asia than what one typically thinks about technology's impact on hospitality, meaning, automation and this and that and so on. When you really think of it, within, the ASEAN population is the same as Europe. But you can imagine if you travel within ASEAN, except for the elites who all speak English, the barriers are still quite considerable linguistically. But when that barrier breaks in a very, very physical and very tangible manner, I think that will prompt travel within Southeast Asia and Southeast Asian traveling outside of Southeast Asia, I think that impact will be even more than the advent of budget carriers, which had a huge impact. Well, I've always said technology is an enabler, either of good or bad. So if you happen to be in an economy which is gearing itself up to be more technically progressive and labor is more scarce and employment is good, then the advent of AI in terms of labor reduction is going to be definitely a very good impact. So no doubt technology of any kind is going to aggravate problems in already, um, I guess, problematic economies. So I would certainly worry if I were in the Philippines in terms of labor displacing AI. But I would worry in the Philippines today anyway for many, many other reasons. A country that has no choice but to send its most educated people overseas to be cheap workers is not an economy that is in good shape by any means. So if you're fundamentally problematic, you're going to be made even more problematic by AI, for sure. I would say probably we would consider Singapore and Phuket to be homes. Then I also commute to Bangkok, and then now to Japan even, because we have a lot of projects there and I have a home there. So between these four places, the time zone is pretty close. And I have 4 sets of Uniqlo clothes everywhere. So I guess I would say I shuttle between these 4 places. I've got a pretty good setup in each of these 4 places, meaning I've got this big monitor screen that I didn't really know was for gaming because it's curved, but it's nice for me because I do a lot of looking at drawings and plans and so on. And so yeah, I don't work out of office anymore. I work out of home and meeting places. I mean, I have lots of meetings where I go physically if I need to, or our project sites. But because of the nature of our business also being quite international and our executives all being sort of deployed globally, I do more Zooms meetings than I need to go to an office. I think it's not just me. I think it's a natural evolution of all international companies, several things happening. First of all, the technology of Zoom and other similar, you know, remote communication devices, which had very, very close contact, and the improvement of it in many other areas where you can look at drawings, you can change drawings, you can actually interact very well. That's only become really popularized during COVID. That's number one. And number two, I suppose, would be also largely prompted by COVID, but it was a natural thing happening anyway, is that a lot of companies now have decentralized headquarters. They don't have one big headquarters in one place. So, for example, we have technically a corporate headquarters in Singapore, but because we have a Singapore listed company, but we also have another 2 companies listed in Bangkok. We have a bulk of our operations in Phuket. We have large operations in China. We have corporate headquarters in Mexico, and so because of that, we operate out of 25 countries. It's natural now what I do. So I think it's a confluence of a lot of factors. I wouldn't call myself a digital nomad to the extent that I would call myself a digital commuter, because a digital nomad actually has more freedom that way. They really go around many other places that they want to go to. And I'm sort of not that nomadic. I'm just a commuter between different places. I hope it won't be a giraffe with the body of a zebra and the tail of a mule. I hope it won't be an animal concocted by a committee. That's the danger, that you don't evolve naturally, and you just become a pastiche of things put together that has not withstood the natural evolution. Okay, so in that sense, I wouldn't want to say the specific animal. I know I mean, you're not gonna evolve from a antelope to a unicorn or to a dragon, and so it's a bit meaningless to sort of use these analogies. I would simply say that, of course, we want to be something relatively fast, nimble. An antelope is not a bad example to use, but I mean, I could easily say a gazelle. I could say anything else. I'm not sure I want to be a rhinoceros or hippo, but what I think I'm more concerned about is that the animal that we want to be would continue to evolve with time. Like even now, we're taking as a small aside. I basically concluded, and all my colleagues agree, that we're no longer talking about climate mitigation. We are talking about climate adaptation. So, for example, in Phuket, we are preparing for a time when we will actually have no water from the government. We're preparing a time when we will have to generate our own electricity. So, I'm looking at climate change as being so clear. No longer are you mitigating it. You have to adapt to severe heat, severe water shortage, and all this sort of stuff. So, in that sense, my whole worldview is informed by my sense that we have to evolve, um, and we need to be aware of the threats as well as the opportunities. That's what evolution is all about. So that's the kind of animal I would want, not one concocted by a committee, or a dinosaur that thinks it's so powerful and fails to adapt to the times. That's an easy answer because that's been asked of me before. So I'm trained with the reply, which is the next one. Well, it's taken us 30 years, but we're not David Bowie. We're not an overnight success. We haven't had our, Glastonbury event, our Newport Festival breakthrough where the world writes about us. We're not rock stars. So I would put it a bit more humbly, not that it takes 30 years to be an overnight success. I think it takes you 30 years to know that you're not going to die. That we're here to stay. We might be we may always be the band that's playing the warm up to an overnight success. I don't know. But I guess my point is it's dangerous to say, even if it takes you 20 years to be the overnight success, because then you're yearning for something which, when it comes, might pass quickly, and then you'll be disappointed. I've always said that we want to always be there, respected, trusted, but not necessarily a big hit.